Hello, I'm Pastor Dave, and this is your Monday morning sermon recap for Monday, May 31st, 2021, Memorial Day. Here we go. This week, we heard of the familiar call of Isaiah as found in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. And in hearing these words, it gives us the opportunity to reflect on God's call in our lives, what that means, and really how God is at work in that process. To start, God will disrupt everything to get our attention. The call is a disruption. It disrupts our lives, and God will work in various ways to get our attention to respond to the call, especially if we're trying to get out of it. Trust me, I know that all too well. But really, the call is a disruption of our lives because it radically changes our life and where we thought our life was going to go. And in many ways, as much as we try to have our own say in this process and within our call, there's a wrinkle in all of that. That is because God is not concerned with our opinions about the situation. I mean, it sounds mean, but it is true. Everyone, myself included, and you can look at the call stories within the Bible, and everyone makes excuses why they shouldn't be the one to do what God asks them to do. In the end, the fact you're watching me, or if we can look at any of the biblical narratives, no one changes God's mind in the calling. If you're called, you're called. It's not all bad, however, even though these first two parts seem to be negative. Because in many ways, even when we're refusing the call and trying to get out of it, God is working in us. God will use the experiences and events in our lives to fulfill the divine plan. God will use what we do, what we experience, and what we learn to do something greater in the future. And maybe, just maybe, that was part of what God intended in the first place. And we should remember that God is with us throughout the entire process of answering the call and living out that call. Part of this comes from the fact that God will strengthen us for the task before us. God's not going to leave us to get through it on our own and to figure out how we're going to do it. Because regardless of how great or small the task is, whether it's something unpleasant or just routine, God is going to help us through that. But most of all, this is the biggest thing that comes when we finally really accept that call, and there's a peace that comes from it. There is a peace in answering the call. Maybe it comes from ending the disruption, or maybe it comes from God's presence and strength in our life as we fulfill God's calling. But in the end, there is a peace in doing what God calls on us to do, whether it's something great as a vocational call or just living our faithful life. So that's your recap for this week. Remember, we worship at 8:45 at East Salem, 10:15 at Otterbein, and we live stream that East Salem service on the East Salem UMC Facebook page at 8:45. But until next week, I hope to see you in the pews.